America's first gun laws. From the Second Amendment to the National Firearms Act, firearms have always played a crucial role in shaping American history, and with that came important decisions about how they should be carried and used. In this video, we'll explore the earliest firearm laws in the United States, starting from the Second Amendment and moving through key moments that defined how firearms were handled across the country. In 1791, the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was adopted, guaranteeing the right of the people to keep and bear arms. This provision was rooted in the early colonial experience, where militias were vital for defense and citizens were expected to provide their own weapons. While the Second Amendment established a right to bear arms, it was intended in the context of maintaining a well-regulated militia. Federal laws at this point were more concerned with organizing militias, rather than restricting firearm use. Shortly after the ratification of the Second Amendment, the Militia Acts of 1792 were enacted. These laws required all able-bodied men between the ages of 18 and 45 to enroll in their state militias and provide their own firearms, typically a musket or a firelock. This marked one of the first instances of federal laws related to firearms. But rather than limiting access to guns, the acts ensured that citizens were properly armed for national defense. The acts did not regulate who could own firearms or how they were used outside of militia service, but they reflect the early American perspective on the importance of firearms for defense. Though the federal government did not impose restrictions on firearms ownership in the early years of the Republic, states began addressing concerns about public safety. By the early 1800s, several states enacted laws to regulate the carrying of concealed firearms. In 1813, both Kentucky and Louisiana passed laws banning the concealed carry of weapons, including pistols. These laws reflected the growing unease over violence in public spaces and dueling, a common practice in that era. Alabama followed in 1837, further expanding the regulation of concealed weapons. These early state laws were focused on how firearms were carried, not on the ownership of firearms themselves. The states sought to balance the right to bear arms with the need for public safety by preventing the concealed carrying of weapons in public spaces. As America grew, so did the challenges associated with firearms. The next major shift in firearm regulation didn't come until the early 20th century, with the rise of organized crime during Prohibition. The first significant federal legislation to regulate firearms was the National Firearms Act, NFA, of 1934. The NFA was a direct response to the increased use of gangster weapons like machine guns and sawed-off shotguns by criminal organizations. It imposed a tax on the manufacture and transfer of certain firearms and required their registration. The act specifically targeted machine guns, short-barreled rifles, shotguns, and devices like silencers. This law marked the first significant federal regulation of firearms. While it didn't focus specifically on pistols, the NFA set a precedent for future firearm regulations and was a key moment in shaping modern firearm laws in the United States. While the U.S. was still forming its gun laws over in the United Kingdom, the Pistols Act of 1903 was one of the first to regulate the sale of pistols specifically. It prohibited the sale of pistols to anyone without a license and to minors, reflecting a growing concern about the accessibility of handguns in the hands of those not deemed responsible. Interestingly, the U.S. didn't adopt such stringent laws for pistols until much later, as the focus remained on other types of firearms throughout much of the 19th and early 20th centuries. In the post-Civil War era, particularly in the American West, towns began to take matters into their own hands. Municipal governments in places like Dodge City, Kansas, passed laws prohibiting the carrying of guns within city limits to reduce violence. These local laws were essential to maintaining order in what were often lawless environments. The famous sign at the entrance to Dodge City reading, "The carrying of firearms strictly prohibited," illustrates how even in the Wild West, gun control measures were seen as a way to ensure peace and security. From the adoption of the Second Amendment to the National Firearms Act of 1934, the history of firearms in the United States is a story of balancing individual rights with public safety. Early state laws focused on concealed carry, while federal legislation began to take shape in response to new technologies and the rise of crime. As you can see, the role of firearms has been central to both individual rights and public safety throughout U.S. history. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos on firearm history and key developments. Share your thoughts in the comments below.